Have you ever stopped and wondered, even for just a moment, if the things happening in your life, both the good and the bad, are part of something much bigger? What if the struggles, the coincidences, and even the moments of silence you experience are all part of a divine conversation that's been unfolding since the day you were born? What if every step you've taken, no matter how lost you might have felt at times, was a step towards something profound and sacred? These are the questions that lie at the heart of discovering the miracle of understanding God's messages. And trust me, these messages are everywhere if you know how to look for them. Let's start with this. Have you ever felt like life was trying to tell you something? Maybe it was a recurring dream, a sudden feeling of déjà vu, or a moment where everything seemed to align perfectly, even if just for a second. Those moments might feel random, but they're not. They are whispers from the divine, gentle nudges meant to guide you on your spiritual path. The problem is, most of us don't know how to recognize them. We're too busy, too distracted, or too caught up in our own doubts to see what's right in front of us. So, let me ask you this. When was the last time you truly listened to yourself, to the world around you, to the still, small voice within your heart? Because that's where God's messages begin. They don't come in loud, obvious ways. They come in the quiet moments, the subtle signs, the things we often overlook. It might be a random conversation with a stranger that leaves you thinking for days. It might be a song you hear at the exact moment you needed to hear it. Or it might be something as simple as a feeling, a deep, unshakable knowing that you're being guided, even if you don't know where you're going yet.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
But here's the thing. Understanding God's messages isn't just about noticing signs. It's about decoding them, interpreting them, and applying them to your life in a way that transforms you. And that's where the real challenge lies. Because let's be honest, how often do we ignore the things that make us uncomfortable? How often do we brush off those gut feelings, those moments of clarity, because they don't fit into our plans? The truth is, God's messages don't always come in the form we want them to. They come in the form we need. And sometimes that means they challenge us. They push us. They force us to confront parts of ourselves we'd rather avoid. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're going through a tough time, a breakup, a loss, a period of uncertainty. In the middle of that pain, it's easy to feel abandoned, like God isn't listening or doesn't care. But what if that pain is the message? What if it's a way of saying, you're stronger than this? You're capable of so much more than you realize. What if it's a call to let go of something that's been holding you back, even if it hurts in the moment? You see, God doesn't just speak to us through blessings. He speaks to us through challenges, through growth, through the moments that force us to question everything so we can find the answers that truly matter. But let's take this deeper. What does it actually mean to listen to God? It's not just about praying or meditating or waiting for some miraculous sign to appear in the sky. It's about cultivating a mindset of openness, a willingness to see the sacred in the ordinary. Because the truth is, God's messages are all around you, all the time. They're in the people you meet, the opportunities that come your way, the obstacles that force you to grow. They're in nature, in the rhythm of the seasons, in the way the sun rises and sets without fail. They're in you, in your thoughts, your feelings, your intuition. The question isn't whether God is speaking. The question is, are you listening? And if you're not, don't worry, you're not alone. Most of us spend our lives searching for answers outside of ourselves, when the truth is, the answers are already within us. But here's the catch. To hear them, you have to be willing to get quiet. You have to be willing to sit with yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, even when your mind is racing with doubts and fears. Because it's in the stillness that God's voice becomes clear. It's in the silence that the noise of the world fades away, and you can finally hear the truth that's been waiting for you all along. So, here's my challenge for you. Take a moment today, just one moment, to pause and reflect. Ask yourself, what is life trying to teach me right now? What is God trying to show me? And then listen. Don't overthink it. Don't try to force an answer. Just listen. Because the miracle of understanding God's messages isn't about figuring everything out all at once. It's about trusting the process, trusting yourself, and trusting that you are exactly where you're meant to be, even if it doesn't feel that way yet. But here's the beautiful thing. Once you start paying attention, once you start opening yourself up to the possibility that every moment is filled with divine meaning, everything changes. You start to see connections where you once saw chaos. You start to feel guided where you once felt lost. And you start to realize that you are not alone on this journey. You never have been. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to move through life with a sense of peace and purpose, while others feel constantly lost or disconnected? It's not because they've been given a special map or an easier path. It's because they've learned to interpret the hidden language of the universe. They've learned to see the signs that are constantly being placed in front of them, like breadcrumbs leading them toward their spiritual purpose. And the truth is, this ability isn't reserved for a select few. You have access to it too. The question is, are you willing to open your heart and mind to it? The universe, or God, speaks to us in a language that isn't always obvious. It's subtle, symbolic, and deeply personal. What might be a sign for you could mean nothing to someone else, and that's part of the beauty of it. It's a language that's tailored specifically to you, based on your experiences, your challenges, and your unique spiritual journey. But here's the catch: you can't decode it using logic alone. Understanding God's messages requires intuition, trust, and a willingness to look beyond the surface of things. Let me ask you this. Have you ever experienced a moment where something just felt too coincidental to ignore? Maybe you were thinking about someone and they called you out of the blue. Maybe you saw the same number or symbol over and over again, almost as if it were following you. Or maybe you faced a challenge that, in hindsight, turned out to be the exact thing you needed to grow. These are not random events. They are part of the hidden language of the universe, a language that is constantly trying to guide you, comfort you, and wake you up to your higher purpose. The first step to decoding these signs is to recognize them, and that starts with awareness. Most of us go through life on autopilot, too distracted by our routines and responsibilities to notice the miracles unfolding around us. But when you start paying attention, when you open your eyes, your ears, and your heart, you begin to see that signs are everywhere. They might come in the form of synchronicities, like meeting the right person at the right time. They might show up as patterns, like repeatedly hearing the same advice or encountering the same challenge. Or they might appear as symbols, like a recurring animal, number, or phrase that seems to carry a deeper meaning. But here's the thing, not every sign will make sense right away. Some will feel obvious, like a neon arrow pointing you in a certain direction. Others will feel cryptic, like a riddle you're meant to solve over time. And that's okay. Part of the journey is learning to trust that even when you don't fully understand the message, it's leading you exactly where you need to go. So, how do you begin to interpret these signs? The first key is to pay attention to how they make you feel. God's messages are not just intellectual, they're emotional, intuitive, and often visceral. When you encounter something that feels like a sign, take a moment to check in with yourself. Does it spark a sense of curiosity, peace, or excitement? Does it feel like a gentle nudge, a wake-up call, or a confirmation of something you already knew deep down? Trust those feelings, because they are the language of your soul. Next, consider the context. Signs don't exist in a vacuum, they are always connected to what's happening in your life. Ask yourself, what's going on in my life right now? What am I struggling with, hoping for, or trying to understand? Often the signs you receive will directly relate to the questions you've been asking, whether consciously or unconsciously. For example, if you've been feeling stuck in your career and you keep seeing images or hearing stories about starting over, that's not a coincidence. It's a message, a reminder that new beginnings are possible, even if they feel scary. But let's take this even deeper. God's messages aren't just meant to guide you, they're meant to transform you. And that means they often challenge you to grow in ways you might not expect. Sometimes, the signs you receive will push you out of your comfort zone, asking you to take a leap of faith or let go of something you've been clinging to. Other times, they'll call you to slow down, reflect, and reconnect with what truly matters. Either way, they are always leading you toward your highest good, even if the path feels uncertain or uncomfortable in the moment. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're going through a difficult relationship. You've been asking for guidance, praying for clarity, but instead of receiving a clear answer, you keep encountering signs that seem contradictory. One moment you see a quote about forgiveness and second chances. The next you see something about letting go and walking away. It might feel confusing at first, but this is where the real work begins. Instead of looking for a black and white answer, ask yourself, what is this situation teaching me? What part of myself is being called to grow? Sometimes the message isn't about the relationship itself, it's about you. It's about learning to set boundaries, to trust your intuition, or to love yourself enough to make the right choice. And here's the beautiful part. The more you engage with these messages, the more they'll reveal themselves to you. It's like learning a new language. The more you practice, the more fluent you become. Over time, you'll start to notice patterns and connections that were invisible to you before. You'll begin to see that everything, every challenge, every blessing, every moment is part of a larger conversation between you and the divine. But let me ask you something profound. What if the signs you're receiving aren't just about you? What if they're also about the people you're meant to impact, the lives you're meant to touch? Because here's the truth, your spiritual path is never just about your own growth. It's about how your growth creates ripples that extend far beyond you. When you follow God's messages, when you step into alignment with your higher purpose, you inspire others to do the same. You become a living example of what's possible, a light that helps others find their way. So here's my advice, don't just look for signs. Live as if you are a sign. Live as if your actions, your choices, and your presence are part of the divine language that helps others understand their own path. Because they are. You are not just a receiver of God's messages, you are also a messenger. And that means your life has the power to inspire, to heal, and to transform in ways you can't even begin to imagine. Let's take a moment to reflect on something profound. What if the message you've been waiting for is hidden in the silence? I know that might sound strange, even frustrating. After all, we often expect God's guidance to come in obvious ways through signs, synchronicities, or undeniable moments of clarity. But what if the most profound messages are the ones that come in the spaces between? What if the silence isn't an absence of communication, but a form of communication itself? Silence is one of the greatest teachers, yet it's also one of the hardest to embrace. In a world that demands constant noise, productivity, and answers, silence can feel like a void, a terrifying reminder of our own uncertainty. But here's the truth. Silence is not empty. It's full of wisdom, full of possibilities, and full of the answers you've been seeking. The challenge is learning to sit with it, to trust it, and to listen to what it's trying to tell you. Have you ever prayed or meditated and felt like nothing was happening? Like you were pouring your heart out to God, only to be met with silence? If you have, I want you to know that you're not alone. This is one of the most common experiences on the spiritual path, and it's also one of the most misunderstood. Because here's the thing, the silence isn't a sign that God isn't listening. It's a sign that you're being invited to go deeper. Think about it this way. When you're having a conversation with a loved one, silence doesn't mean the connection is broken. Sometimes it's in the pauses, the unspoken moments, that the deepest understanding takes place. The same is true with God. The silence isn't a rejection, it's an invitation. An invitation to stop searching outside of yourself for answers and start looking within. But let me ask you this, why is silence so uncomfortable for most of us? Why do we fill our days with distractions, our minds with endless chatter, and our hearts with fear of the unknown? The answer is simple yet profound. Silence forces us to face ourselves. It strips away the noise, the distractions, and the masks we wear, leaving us with nothing but the raw truth of who we are. And that can be scary. It can bring up doubts, fears, and insecurities we'd rather avoid. But it can also bring clarity, peace, and a deeper connection to the divine than we ever thought possible. So, how do you begin to find clarity in the silence? The first step is to make space for it. You can't hear God's quietest messages if you're constantly surrounded by noise, whether it's the literal noise of your environment or the mental noise of your own thoughts. Take time each day to unplug, to step away from the distractions, and to simply be. This doesn't have to be complicated. It could be as simple as sitting in stillness for 5 minutes, taking a walk in nature without your phone, or practicing a few moments of deep, mindful breathing. The second step is to approach the silence with curiosity, not judgment. When you sit in stillness, your mind will inevitably wander. You might feel restless, or you might start to hear the voice of your inner critic telling you that you're wasting your time. That's okay. Instead of fighting these thoughts or judging yourself for having them, simply observe them. Acknowledge them, and then let them go. Think of it as clearing away the static so you can tune into the deeper frequency of God's voice. But here's the paradox. Sometimes, the silence itself is the message. Sometimes, God uses silence to teach us patience, trust, and surrender. Because let's be honest, we're not very good at waiting, are we? We want answers, and we want them now. But the spiritual path doesn't work that way. It's not about instant gratification, it's about transformation. And transformation takes time. It takes faith. It takes a willingness to sit in the uncertainty, trusting that clarity will come when the time is right. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're driving through a dense fog. You can't see more than a few feet in front of you, and it's tempting to stop the car and wait for the fog to lift. But if you do that, you'll never reach your destination. Instead, you have to keep moving forward, even if it's slow, even if you can only see the next step. That's what it's like to navigate the silence. You don't always get a clear roadmap, but you get just enough light to take the next step. And that's all you need. But let's go even deeper. Silence doesn't just teach us to trust, it teaches us to listen in a new way. When you sit in stillness long enough, you start to notice things you never noticed before. You start to hear the whispers of your own intuition, the subtle nudges of your soul, and the quiet yet powerful presence of the divine. And you begin to realize that these whispers were always there, you just weren't listening. Let me ask you something profound. What if the silence you've been avoiding is the very thing your soul needs to heal? What if it's not a punishment, but a gift? A sacred space where you can let go of the noise, the expectations, and the pressures of the world, and simply rest in the presence of God. Because that's what silence is. It's not a void, it's a sanctuary. A place where you can reconnect with the truth of who you are and the divine purpose that brought you here. And here's the beautiful part. Once you learn to embrace the silence, it starts to change you. You become more patient, more present, and more attuned to the subtle messages that are always unfolding around you. You start to notice the small miracles, the way the wind moves through the trees, the way a stranger's smile can brighten your day, the way your own breath is a reminder of the life force that sustains you. And you begin to see that these moments are not random. They are part of the divine conversation, the quiet yet powerful way that God speaks to us every day. So, here's my advice: don't fear the silence. Embrace it, sit with it, listen to it, and trust that even when it feels empty, it is full of wisdom, love, and guidance. Because the miracle of understanding God's messages isn't just about hearing the words, it's about learning to hear the spaces between them. Now that you've begun to recognize God's messages and understand their hidden meanings, even in silence, the question becomes, what do you do with them? Because receiving a message, no matter how profound, is not enough. The real transformation happens when you take what you've been given and align your life with it. This is where the spiritual journey becomes an active practice, one that requires courage, faith, and action. Let me ask you something deeply personal. How often do you feel like you're living in alignment with your true purpose? Be honest with yourself. Are you living in a way that feels connected to the divine, or are you simply going through the motions, reacting to life rather than co-creating it? If you feel disconnected, you're not alone. Most of us, at some point, get caught up in the busyness of life, losing touch with the deeper truths that guide us. But here's the good news: it's never too late to realign. Walking the path of alignment starts with one simple but powerful step: surrender. And I know, surrender can sound like giving up, like letting go of control. But in a spiritual sense, surrender isn't about giving up, it's about tuning in. It's about releasing your attachment to how you think things should be and opening yourself to how they are meant to be. It's about trusting that God's plan for you is bigger, wiser, and more beautiful than anything you could create on your own. But surrendering isn't easy, is it? It requires you to let go of your ego, the part of you that wants to control everything, that fears uncertainty, that clings to old habits and beliefs, even when they no longer serve you. And that can feel terrifying. But here's the truth: when you let go of the need to control, you make space for something greater. You make space for grace, for miracles, for the kind of divine guidance that can only come when you're willing to step out of the way. Let me share something powerful with you. God's messages often require action, but not just any action, aligned action. What does this mean? It means taking steps that are in harmony with the truth you've received, even when those steps feel uncomfortable or uncertain. For example, if you've been receiving signs that it's time to let go of a toxic relationship, aligned action might mean having a difficult conversation or setting boundaries. If you've been feeling called to pursue a dream, aligned action might mean taking that first scary step, even if you don't know where it will lead. But here's the thing: aligned action doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have everything figured out before you take the first step. In fact, you rarely will. Walking the spiritual path is not about having all the answers, it's about trusting the process. It's about taking one step at a time, knowing that each step will reveal the next one. It's about moving forward with faith, even when the road ahead is unclear. And this brings us to another essential part of aligning with God's messages: staying present. So often we get caught up in the past, replaying old mistakes, holding on to guilt, or wishing we could change what's already happened. Or we get lost in the future, worrying about what might go wrong or waiting for the perfect time to act. But the truth is, the only place where you can connect with God, where you can hear His messages and act on them, is in the present moment. Let me ask you this: when was the last time you truly lived in the present, not thinking about yesterday, not worrying about tomorrow, but fully experiencing the here and now? Because when you're present, something miraculous happens. You become more aware of the divine guidance that's always available to you. You start to notice the little signs, the quiet nudges, the opportunities that were there all along but were hidden by the noise of your own mind. But staying present doesn't just happen, it's a practice. It's something you cultivate through mindfulness, gratitude, and a commitment to being fully engaged with your life. One simple way to start is by grounding yourself in your senses. Right now, take a deep breath. Feel the air fill your lungs. Notice the sounds around you, the sensations in your body, the rhythm of your heartbeat. This is the present moment. This is where God's messages live. Another way to align your life with God's messages is by cultivating gratitude. Gratitude is one of the most powerful spiritual tools we have because it shifts our focus from what we lack to what we already have. And when you focus on what you have, you begin to see it as a gift, a message from the divine reminding you that you are supported, loved, and guided. Even in the hardest times, there is always something to be grateful for. And when you practice gratitude, you align yourself with the frequency of love, which is the language of God. But let's talk about something crucial: resistance. Because the truth is, even when you know what God is asking of you, even when you feel the pull toward alignment, there will be moments when you resist. Moments when fear, doubt, or pride try to hold you back. And that's okay. Resistance is part of the journey. But the key is to recognize it, to acknowledge it, and then to move through it with compassion and courage. Ask yourself, what am I resisting in my life right now? What truth am I avoiding? Maybe you're avoiding a decision you know you need to make. Maybe you're holding onto a belief or habit that no longer serves you. Whatever it is, know that resistance is not a sign of failure, it's a sign of growth. It's a sign that you're on the edge of something transformative, something sacred. And this is where faith comes in. Faith is not about blindly believing in something outside of yourself, it's about trusting the divine wisdom within you. It's about knowing that even when the path feels uncertain, even when you take a step and stumble, you are still moving in the right direction. Because here's the truth, God's messages are not about perfection. They are about progress. They are about becoming the person you were created to be, one step, one choice, one moment at a time. So, here's my challenge for you. Take one step today to align your life with God's messages. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be honest. Maybe it's reaching out to someone you've been avoiding. Maybe it's setting aside time to pray, meditate, or simply sit in silence. Maybe it's saying yes to an opportunity that scares you or no to something that's draining your energy. Whatever it is, do it with intention. Do it with faith. And do it knowing that every step you take, no matter how small, is bringing you closer to the life you were meant to live. Let me leave you with this. Understanding God's messages is not just about listening, it's about living. It's about turning divine guidance into action, turning faith into courage, and turning love into a way of being. And when you do that, when you align your life with the truth that's been calling to you all along, you become a living miracle. You become the message. And that is the greatest gift you can give to yourself and to the world. Because in the end, the miracle isn't just in understanding God's messages, it's in becoming one.